Welcome, everybody. Bienvenidos a todos. My name is Fernando Giraldo, and I'm the Chief Probation Officer for Santa Cruz County. We will be having simultaneous translation. Click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and click your language preference, English or Spanish, y ahora lo voy a decir en español para que entiendan todo. Tendremos traducción simultánea. Haga un clic en el icono de interpretación en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Haga clic en su preferencia de idioma, inglés o español. It's a great pleasure to join you and make a few brief remarks about the very important work that has been going on over the last 3 years to increase support for survivors of crime. In a moment, you will hear from a diverse group of speakers who will share their role, along with the support of the Community Corrections Partnership, Community Engagement, and Education work groups, and many other community representatives to implement the Blueprint for Shared Safety framework, first introduced to our county in 2017. In the 2020 Santa Cruz County Shared Safety Report, which places survivors at the center, is the culmination of nearly 2 years of work led by committed stakeholders who volunteered to help push forward an agreed upon framework for addressing the unique needs of crime survivors in a manner which is trauma-informed, healing, and inclusive. This framework has helped our criminal justice stakeholders, local service providers, and community members design a response to advance how we serve survivors of crime. This work is also aligned and supported by the 2018-2024 County Strategic Plan and the Comprehensive Health and Safety Focus Area. The Blueprint for Shared Safety has helped frame our work around supporting wellness for everyone. It's helped us re-envision a new framework for achieving safety in our community. We started with the same baseline questions. Why are the people most harmed often the least helped? How would our approach to breaking the cycle of harm and trauma change if we centered our efforts around what survivors, those most directly affected, say would make them feel safe? The process of the shared safety work that led up to the report revealed and confirmed what we thought. Crime survivors need and want a voice at the table where decisions are made about events that have caused them harm and trauma. We know that the most vulnerable in our community are often the most victimized. They may be the neighbors next door where a shooting took place, the family that had their home burglarized, or the individual that has survived domestic violence. We hope to elevate survivor voices, ensure access to trauma and healing services, and strengthen trust and confidence in our criminal justice system. As you hear the speakers this evening, I would ask you to consider the following principles, which are based on restorative justice. Who has been harmed? What do they need? Whose obligation is it to meet those needs? I think the answers to these questions are a fine way to start the healing process. Core of this work being done is the concept of joint responsibility. When a commitment to safety is shared from the ground up among probation, which I represent, law enforcement, survivors, public officials, community groups, and others, the bonds of accountability and chances of achieving safety grow stronger. Thank you for joining us. I'll now pass the mic to Jorge Zavala, community leader, who will review the agenda. Gracias.
Thank you, Fernando, for the introduction, and thank you all that are here joining us for this forum. My name is Jorge Zavala, and I'm a community leader with COPA, but today I come to you as in a different capacity. So many of you have deep roots here and have many lived experiences. Some of you are caregivers, fathers, mothers, social workers, counselors that have consoled those being afflicted by the pressures on their families. These pressures have been exacerbated due to COVID, recent natural disasters, our national politics, the recent racial justice uprising, but bringing to light the continued inequities of health, housing, food, economics, and access to resources. Whether you're a survivor or a service provider or a friend, we are hearing stories from our families and our community that have experienced incredible amounts of stress and trauma. As a result, we are seeing a rise in mental health crises, violent substance abuse, and thus have had some lives lost. As a sign of respect for those lives and the families that have been affected, I'd like to offer a moment of silence. So today's forum is meant to deepen our understanding of the impacts of crime on survivors, advance health and healing, break the cycle of harm, and envision a community where everyone can attain safety. At the end, you will have an opportunity to continue in some capacity with your engagement as we bring this vision to reality. During this evening's event, we will be discussing some sensitive topics. Right? In our commitment to being trauma responsive, we need to create the space, and we'll provide some resources in the chat function, or you can message a moderator if you need to talk to somebody. We have some counselors on staff right here with us. So what does putting survivors at the center really mean? Stakeholders are not just those that provide services, but also those that have experienced crime and violence, and those families in our community. How can we use these resources to shift the systems in creating a safer community, right? You all ask that question. So it's by having them and their stories at the table. So many of you know me in my work community organizing as a leader with COPA, or maybe in another capacity in a park, or in many different ways I contribute here. But I'm here today because I too, being exposed to this work, this framework, I realized that I'm a survivor of crime. And unfortunately, I have many stories, but I'll just tell a short one. In 2006, my brother was dealing with the loss of our father, just like I was. And after a few breakdowns, I convinced him to seek help at Dominican Hospital, the health unit. And at the time, we found out that he wasn't diagnosed correctly when he was incarcerated as a juvenile. So on our visit, he was notified that he had $11,000 in back payments due. Imagine telling a 21-year-old kid, really, with mental health struggles, that he had this type of money available to him. It was tough, honestly, because I became his payee and he was struggling, right? And so before he left Santa Cruz for Merced, he said, you know, we need to give these blank kids something to do, like soccer. We don't like soccer, but they do, right? So he helped fund a summer program that later became futsal, and the expansion of the Sheriff Activity League into Live Oak. So it's kind of poetic, because on opening day that summer I decided to move, but I wondered what would happen with my brother, right? He moved to Merced to get away from Santa Cruz and his friends and acquaintances and started attending college, right? He still loved to skate and shaved his head. On opening day of futsal in 2010, the crispy smell of pupusas, burgers, tacos filled the air. We had Sheriff Hart there, the former Supervisor Leopold, about 500 community members. But my sister called me while I was emceeing the event. So I answered her call and found out my brother was killed in Merced on his way to school while waiting for the bus. My heart sank, and I quickly brought together the coaches, the volunteers, and let them know that I was going to be leaving and it was up to them to organize. And they did, right? A teen center, family resource center, volunteer center, healthcare clinic, even a day worker center was built here in Live Oak. Futsal was just the beginning, and so much more was done since, and so many changes in our system and so many opportunities, but it's still so much left to do. So we're here today to continue this work. So today we're gonna increase the understanding of our shared safety framework, connect Santa Cruz County's efforts to a larger statewide national movement, highlight local commitments on what's been done so far, center the voices of those with lived experience, and provide opportunity for connection. Then we'll discuss next steps and ways that you too can get involved. So a little bit of housekeeping. In order to be able to listen to the whole forum here, select a language. Pues otra vez, si ustedes han llegado un poco tarde, por favor seleccione su lenguaje por interpretación. Ahí el globito, there's a little world that you can pick English there. And then, so once again, before I continue, I want to let you know that during this event, you're going to be hearing some sensitive topics. And so if you need some assistance, just send us a message in the chat and message one of the moderators. So in addition, you'll be provided with some links to some mental health resources for those that you may know in crisis. So we're also used to running around, we used to run around to meetings, right? But now we're Zooming around. So the chat function is disabled, but you can message a moderator. And this way you can really tune in to what's being shared and create that space, right? And please listen with open hearts and open ears. And if you have tech issues, feel free to let us know and somebody will be in touch with you. And materials and the recording will be available after the event and will be sent out. So also just one last little disclaimer. We are committed to including a diverse range of experiences, and the views that are going to be shared here and expressed during the forum do not necessarily represent the views, policies, or positions of the organizers of this event. So we will hear an authentic share from people in the space we've created. It's once again important to listen with an open ear and open heart. So want to give a chance now for y'all to participate. Prior to this forum, how many of you have heard of shared safety? The little poll is going to come up right now. And if you can go ahead and select yes or no. So have you heard of shared safety? Yes or no? Maybe you're like me and are new to this. Just give it a second to complete. So you should see a question on your screen now. You want to just hit yes or no and then submit. Yes, can you share the results of the poll? Right, we're about half here. So 51% say yes and 49% is a no. And so, like I said, I joined that 49%. And I did hear about this framework when I was asked to participate in this forum. And I gotta say, I'm really excited. And to learn more, I would like to introduce our next speaker, David Guizar with Alliance for Safety and Justice, who will discuss the overall blueprint for shared safety. Yeah, David, you're on mute. You want to go ahead and unmute your microphone? Yes, David, you're going to need to unmute a little microphone right there. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. I had lost control of my what's it called? But thank you, Jorge, for that introduction, and thank you for uplifting, your brother in his spirit of service to help others, and thank everyone. Thank you everyone for in Santa Cruz County, who has been leading the shared safety work since 2017, and who put together this important forum, including Sarah, Chief Geraldo, Andrew, Mary Lou, DA Jeff Rosell and his lead victim advocate Sylvia, Sheriff Hart in his office, Betsy and Monica in the Fund for Nonviolence, and importantly, all of the local survivors, community advocates and organizations and CCP working group members. My name is David Guizar, and I'm a survivor and regional manager for Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. And, and unfortunately, I too share a very similar story to Jorge, in which I've lost, two brothers, my brother Oscar in 1983 and my brother Gilbert in 2012. And, when I'm able to, compare both experiences, one of the things that I realized is that, with my brother Oscar, I was 10 years old and I didn't know how to navigate the system. And I don't recall my mom having access to that support, and therefore it was very difficult for our family. In 2012, I was fortunate enough to have a little bit of understanding of this process as I began to be involved in Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. It was founded that same year, 2 months prior to my brother being murdered, So when I committed myself, 2 months later, my brother Gilbert was murdered, and I had to rapidly adjust and adapt. So it's definitely heartbreaking to have to carry this type of story. But at the same time, here's an opportunity to bring back some of the elements of shared safety that can hopefully alleviate some of this, hardship. So I'm really excited, first of all, to be here with you in these next steps of Shared Safety Santa Cruz, providing the support needed to advance this work. As a quick background, CSSJ is a network of crime survivors joining together to create healing communities and help shape public policy. What started off as a statewide network in California has grown. It started in 2012, as previously mentioned, and it has now grown into a national network with chapters growing in seven different states, and membership of more than 10,000 here alone in California, and over 42,000 nationally. I was fortunate enough, to know of Barrios Unidos in their critical gang intervention work in Santa Cruz since the mid-1990s. I was involved in some type of community work back then as well. And I was able to reconnect with Santa Cruz by working with community leadership and survivors from Barrios Unidos and their participation in our Survivor Speak conference a couple of years ago, as we were heading into Sacramento to advance and advocate for policies that respond to survivor needs, which is, and this Survivor Speak platform is the largest gathering of crime victims in the United States, joining with state and community leaders to represent a new victims movement focused on accountability and healing. These two goals are not mutually exclusive. Shared safety recognizes it is important to have accountability and healing, and that it takes all of us working together to do that in order to create, safe communities. And that's the foundation of the work being led in Santa Cruz. I'm just a little nervous, man. I started off on the bad side, but I'm picking it up. So let me just take a little sip of water, and then give a major acknowledgement to Chief Giraldo, and thank you for inviting Shared Safety to Santa Cruz for that first meeting back in 2017. Today marks almost exactly 4 years since Santa Cruz County began exploring the shared safety framework and how it could be used to uplift all of the great work that was already happening across the county in a way that more deeply connects with survivors and community members to collectively build shared responsibility around community safety. You have tireless, dedicated, innovative system leaders in Santa Cruz who have recognized for a long time that we cannot arrest our way out of social problems, violence, and trauma, and that they cannot do this alone. The shared safety work has been so fortunate to have the insight and expertise of your county leaders and community members who want to work together to address systemic violence and create systemic change. Today's forum will uplift that history and that incredible milestones that have already been reached in Shared Safety Santa Cruz. over the past 4 years. For now, I wanted to share 2 PowerPoint slides of some of the images we captured since 2017 in the history in the making, in that history in the making. With Chief Giraldo's and Sarah's leadership, and with critical funding support from CPP and the Fund for Nonviolence, my colleagues Marissa and Elizabeth were able to conduct focus groups across Santa Cruz County to hear directly from folks about what made them feel safe, who is most vulnerable, how they would like to measure safety, and how they all wanted to collectively create a vision for shared safety for Santa Cruz County. They brought together small discussion groups that included local community service providers and advocates, survivors, the DA's office, probation, and even men and women in the local jail. We are very thankful to Sheriff Hart and his team for allowing us the opportunity to be inside the facility and witness those group discussions, to have these group discussions, right? Marissa, Elizabeth, Andrew, Sarah, Chief Giraldo, and Erica then spent months putting together all of that initial community input, which led to the Santa Cruz County Blueprint for Shared Safety and this forum. You will see photos here too of Chief Giraldo, Andrew, and Sarah presenting at the Santa Cruz work at the Shared Safety Roundtable meetings and at Survivor Speak 2019. I'm almost there. The Shared Safety Framework is built around putting survivors at the center, and importantly, it recognizes that survivors of crime are anyone who has been directly impacted by our experienced crime, violence, including crimes committed by state, witnessed crime, violence, have been impacted by crime and violence in their daily life. This often includes individuals who have been arrested and or imprisoned. The traditional use of the criminal justice system often offers victims a choice of punishment or nothing, but state and national surveys of crime survivors have revealed that strictly punitive measures do not necessarily provide the healing and accountability they most need. Meaningfully putting crime survivors at the center means finding out who is most vulnerable to and impacted by crime, and finding out from them what they need. It means recognizing the importance of healing for individuals, families, neighborhoods, and communities as a whole. The pandemic has shown us how critical it is to do this, to really listen to our most vulnerable community members about what they need. Equally important, the Shared Safety Framework recognizes and creates a space for survivors and all community members to feel a shared safety responsibility in creating this vision of safety. That means working with our local system leaders to develop and implement shared safety. And when you put survivors at the center of the safety discussion, it really transforms how we develop safety strategies. It allows us to collectively start thinking about how to create safety instead of instead of just how do we respond to crime. And so we start expanding the definition of safety to include police, emergency, fire, and well-being, and violence prevention, and community health care. And this is how together we can realign safety priorities by shifting budget decision-making from correction spending to investments in community well-being that drive safety. This is just one example of what is possible as a first step in shared safety. Our Shared Safety California Roundtable includes Sacramento, Los Angeles, and Stockton, San Joaquin County, all of which have made similar first steps by just shifting language to define well-being as safety. You can see on this slide how much these cities have been able to move the needle towards shared safety. The easiest way to explain shared safety is to say, shared safety is more than the absence of violence and crime. It must be the presence of well-being. La seguridad compartida es más que la ausencia del crimen, es la presencia del bienestar. The traditional criminal justice model waits for harm or crime to happen and then reacts by deciding what punishment to apply. The shared safety framework helps communities to prevent harm and crime from happening in the first place by investing in the community-based services and resources that local community members have said they need. And this is what we will learn more about in today's forum. With that, I will pass the Zoom mic back to Jorge, and thank you so much.
Wow, thank you, David. Thank you. Thank you for providing us with a better understanding of the framework around shared safety and what the overall, just the shift in language and putting survivors at the center. And also thank you for uplifting your brothers as well in your share. And, with this new Zooming here that we're doing, we sometimes experience some technical glitches here and there. And so the next segment we're going to be sharing is a pre-recorded video clip of some of our local shared safety champions here. And so go ahead and play the video clip. It's only going to be a few minutes here. Thank you.
This country is in the movement towards building a system of shared safety framework where we all have a role to play. Santa Cruz County developed a shared safety plan which outlines our shared responsibility. This plan is about accountability, it's about restoration and healing, it's about equity and our community. Whether you're an individual, an agency, or a government, we all have a role to play to keeping our communities safe, from prevention to intervention for a thriving community for all.
What is possible with this shared safety work is initially, and this part is already happening, a highly skilled network of services in terms of effective intervention and protection after a crime has happened, both for those who are the survivors of crime, but also those who have done harm to others, because they are often also survivors themselves. What is also possible is a coalition of caring community members that are looking at the root causes of crime and inequity in our community and pulling our resources to advocate for change that benefits all of us in terms of shared safety that's built upon mutual trust, respect, and accountability, and actually prevents crime and injustice.
I am very proud to be part of that community because being a survivor myself, reaching out to the resources here in the community was very useful for me. I want to make sure that others who have suffered harm can find the resources to help them heal. And that's why I'm part of this community.
Shared safety is important to me because it means that your safety is connected to my safety, that we have a shared responsibility, which means that everyone has a duty to contribute towards restoration and healing, to contribute towards equity, and to contribute towards making their community a safer place for everyone. I hope that you can join us in this work, and I look forward to seeing you all out there.
I have the honor of working with a committed group of community members to move aspects of the shared safety framework forward. When Chief of Probation Fernando Geraldo proposed that the Community Education and Engagement Workgroup focus on shared safety, I saw it as an incredible opportunity to shift our public safety paradigm. Shared safety is holistic. It's about healing and restoration, It's about breaking the cycle of harm and making the system work. It's about shared responsibility. We all have a role to play in creating safety for all in Santa Cruz County, and I invite you to reach out and be a part of this journey with us. Thank you.
So thank you. So although the share was not live, I know that, sorry, my bad. So I was on the wrong channel. So although we know that the share was not live, it was pre-recorded. I know that some of our champions are here in the audience. So I just want to say thanks for all the work that you do. So now I would like to welcome Janet Valencia, a victims advocate with the Santa Cruz County's District Attorney Office, who will be sharing the work of a committed group of leaders here who have been working on shared safety since 2017.
Thank you, Jorge. Let's see. Okay, here we go. And thanks everyone for being here. I know everyone has really busy schedules, and those that are going to watch this recorded version after, thank you for taking the time. I think everything that we're hearing today is really important, not only in our own work, but in the community as a whole. So I really appreciate that. Let's see here. Okay, and first off, I really want to thank the Community Corrections Partnership, Community Education and Engagement Workgroup, commonly known as CEEW, so you'll see that acronym everywhere because it's a mouthful to say all of that, for all their hard work and countless contributions. There are monthly meetings, everyone joins most of the time and actively participates. We're dealing with and analyzing really complex issues and topics. A lot of times the conversations aren't easy. There is absolutely impressive leadership. And most of all, we have real conversations. And as you heard earlier from Jorge and also David who spoke, there's a lot of vulnerability. And that is something that we really cherish and appreciate. This is a multidisciplinary collaboration. Never before has a group like this worked together. It's definitely a dynamic group with diverse perspectives, and it's really exactly what we need to move this type of work forward. Despite the fact that we're not always agreeing, we come together based on our deep commitment to better serve the needs of survivors of crime and really truly creating safety in our community. And I'm not the only one who feels this way, but that really is our driving force. And I also want to recognize our funders, other community members who have informed this process, and most importantly, survivors of crime. To be better informed, the 2018-2019 Community Education and Engagement Workgroup embarked on an asset gap analysis. This included 175 individuals composed of system stakeholders, diverse community members from North and South Santa Cruz County, youth, crime survivors, those most impacted by these issues. Intentional outreach was done to access monolingual Spanish speakers. In addition to the questions asked about what's working, what exists, what's out there, what are the gaps? Individuals were asked, what does shared safety mean to you? What we heard were themes around community, equity, healing, inclusiveness, having a non-judgmental safe zone, resources, and health. After the data was analyzed, the focus went back to these survivors to share information to them. And they were heard and also asked, is there anything else you would like to add? After the collection of data related to all 5 of the shared safety pillars, it was quickly realized that the largest gap involved crime survivors at the center. The team really dove deep into that issue. So I'll just list the goals that you can see on the screen. Prioritizing healing and restoration for crime survivors, ensuring access to trauma recovery services, engaging crime survivors to prioritize and elevate their voices, strengthening community trust and confidence in the criminal justice system, and really truly recognizing who is most vulnerable to crime. And also just as a side note, I want to say that victim and survivor, the term itself is used interchangeably in this report. We define that as individuals who have been impacted by crime, more commonly violent traumatic crime. The 47-page report is not necessarily an operational plan, but it's just a guiding document, a true starting point. It's the initial phase of the work. So if you have time, we invite you to dive deeper into this report to get a little bit more of the detailed information. Some of the barriers, gaps, and needs that were heard from community included a mistrust of the system. So for example, lived experience, generational mistrust, lack of awareness and information on the criminal justice process. People don't necessarily know about the criminal justice process unless they have to go through it, whether it's someone who caused the harm or someone who was harmed themselves. For victims, knowing that there are actual victim rights and resources available to them, having that access. And most people don't know what's available to them until they actually need it. And sometimes when they need it, they don't know where to start. Also, the need for trauma-informed and victim-centered systems, considering victims who are navigating the system with trauma. Imagine being in a situation where you just lost a loved one, and not only are you trying to process everything that's happened, and we know what the grief cycles are, a lot of the audience does know that, not being able to ask the right questions, not being able to remember, really truly relying, from what I've seen, is on family and friends that can pick up those pieces. It's truly difficult for people to access services. And when they are, maybe they will get some pushback from somebody who may not be trauma informed, because on their end, all they see is this person's losing it. Well, of course they are. They just suffered. So we really need to have centers, or like share this knowledge with others so they can be more attentive to people who have gone through trauma. Another example is data. What does research show about not meeting the needs of victims? And if we are going to meet those needs, how do we also prevent this victimization? Lastly, the need for healing. We as a community need to wrap around our most vulnerable and create a safe space where survivors can heal. Just a side note, something that the work group referenced a significant amount of victim reports. So for example, published by OVC, who is the Office for Victims of Crime, the California Victim Compensation Board, and Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. These findings are not unique. Survivors and victims are reporting these issues across the state and nation. In meeting the needs of survivors of crime, we are increasing safety in our community. We know from research and data that trauma and unmet needs increase the likelihood of unhealthy behavior. So for example, someone coping with a substance as a form of self-medication. This can quickly spiral out of control. These behaviors negatively impact physical and mental health, even the possibility of committing crime themselves. Okay, and then the next slide, 11 recommendations. These have not been prioritized and are in no particular order. Recommendations are based on research, data, and best practices. Things that we can do now: improve data collection. Individual agencies can collect data, gathering information and figuring out ways to collect necessary data to help improve services and meet those needs. Increasing survivor engagement and representation. Ideally, perhaps in this county, even starting a victim survivor-led group. There is a huge need for it. Restorative practices, trauma-informed trainings, providing individuals tools to better serve vulnerable populations, like I spoke about earlier, and things that need more investment and time. An example would be a crime survivor navigator to assist victims in navigating multiple systems and accessing existing community resources and supports. So for example, I'm a victim advocate, but I'm a DA-based victim advocate. We have Monarch, who is a community-based organization, and they have community-based advocates. There are some differences there, but maybe not even having just these two, but also additional people in the community who can be more helpful. You know, it's not easy for someone maybe to go into a community-based organization or even a DA-based, because it's still part of that system, and we need to acknowledge that and have people have access to other crime survivor navigators. But of course, that's going to take time. Increasing these services and resources, and perhaps in this county, even a trauma recovery center. What that would look like, there are other counties who have these recovery centers, and I believe that hopefully sometime soon we'll have something like that here. Okay, and then the last slide, we want to point out that prior to the completion of the report and this forum, as a community, we already saw and have seen shifts due to our intentional collective shared safety work. In 2018, the CCP, CEEW partnered with UCSC, Probation, and Smart on Crime to host the 2018 Restorative Justice Forum featuring Fania Davis, which led to the new Santa Cruz County Neighborhood Courts model, which will hear a little bit coming up, and they are now up and running. There is also a special category for victim services in the 211 resources database. At the end of September of last year, hopefully most of you joined this, CEEW partnered with the Office for Victims of Crime and hosted a trauma-informed leadership. It was a great turnout. There were over 65 leaders who attended. We've seen cultural shifts. Seeing the shift in language is one simple way of explaining it, going from victim to survivor. But those are small steps in the right direction. Every CEEW organization that works with survivors has indicated that they have increased the normalization of asking survivors what they need to heal. This is really important because everybody's different, and we can't assume that somebody is going to heal in the way that we are. They are their own unique person, and we need to be open to that. Organizations have also mentioned an increase in overall mindfulness of clients' needs and sensitivity to crime survivors. New partnerships have stemmed out of the CEEW, both in terms of partnering on collaborative grants as well as resource referrals. More and more, we are hearing about an increase in support for restorative justice practices from judges, district attorneys, and service providers. All in all, the most important takeaway is that putting victims at the center will allow us to better serve those in our community who need it the most, when they need it the most. By our own individual conscious efforts, we will be able to heal our own and be stronger as a collective. So that is all for me. Thank you for listening. And I'm going to pass this on to Denitza Torres and Elaine Johnson, who will talk to you a little bit about the neighborhood courts model here in this county.
Sorry, but before we do that, thank you, Jeanette. And
thanks, Jorge.
We have just a small little activity for y'all to participate in. And so, but before we get started on that, it's important to acknowledge, right, what's been done and all the work and the milestones and the shifts and the system change is huge and complex, right? We are shifting into restorative practices, shifting the way we work together, and bringing forth the survivors at the center. So we're not finished, right? And we need to involve you as a community and your voice. So we're gonna have a small group exercise at the end of the next speakers, right? But for right now, you're gonna get a message in your chat function. It's called a Mentimeter. And so the question that's gonna pop up there, if you just participate, click on the link and it'll take you to a different site but you can go ahead and fill in your response and to the question. Now that you've heard all of this wonderful presentation from David and Jeanette of the work that's been done, when you hear shared safety, what comes to mind? All right, so I'm going to give everyone a chance to participate in this. And then you can come on back and see everyone else's responses. So we have harmony, community, trauma-informed, collaboration, shared responsibility, resiliency, healing, restoration, love, understanding, belonging, healthy community, again, shared responsibility and accountability, safety for all, positive, and awareness. Just want to take a minute for all of that. So as we all come together here, it's reforming community, right, for that healing, equity, and collaboration. So yes, thank you everybody for participating. And so as Jeanette said, I'd now like to hear from representatives from the Neighborhood Courts Program, right? Danitza Torres from the Conflict Resolution Center, and Elaine Johnson from the District Attorney Office.
Good evening. My name is Elaine Johnson, and I am the program coordinator for the Neighborhood Courts Program at the District Attorney's Office. I'm excited to be here with the community leaders who have made this evening possible. You know, I was sitting here as I was listening to the speakers that spoke before me. I had a memory, and I was born and raised in New York City, and I was a senior in high school, and I was working as a cashier in a supermarket across the street from Yankee Stadium. And these two guys walked in, and 1 minute they were talking to me, and the next minute I knew they had a gun to my head. And what I just realized after hearing everybody speaking is I didn't realize the impact that had on me, and the fact that I am also a survivor of a trauma event. And so I'm so honored to be here today, to be amongst the community leaders who is bringing this information to the forefront, so that everyone in the community and beyond can know that there's help is out there. So I'm going to share about the Neighborhood Courts Program. The Neighborhood Courts Program's foundation is based on restorative justice principles. So for example, in a traditional justice system, you may hear words like what law was broken, who broke the law, and what punishment is deserved. But with the principles of restorative justice, the focus is on the harm that was caused and what are the needs of everyone involved. Neighborhood Courts is a pre-filing diversion program. It uses restorative justice principles to solve nonviolent, low-level misdemeanor cases that would otherwise be prosecuted. It is a model for keeping participants that have committed low-level misdemeanor offenses from entering the criminal justice system. The program is community-based and volunteer-driven. Instead of cases going through the traditional criminal justice system, such as meeting in a courtroom, meeting with attorneys and stuff, the confidential restorative justice conferences are held in settings where participants meet with volunteers who are members of the local community. Part of the design of the conference is to hold the participants accountable for their actions by helping them see how their actions have caused harm to the victim when present and the community. The program addresses crimes that impact the quality of life in Santa Cruz County. It addresses the needs of the victim, the participant, and the community. Participation in the program is strictly voluntary. The participant may choose to go through the traditional criminal justice system, or they can go through the Neighborhood Courts Program. The way the program works is eligible cases are diverted by the district attorney's office to the neighborhood courts program. To start the program off, 13 low-level misdemeanor offenses were selected. The offenses selected are petty theft, shoplifting, vandalism, trespassing, disorderly conduct, drunk in public, misdemeanor assault and battery, drug possession, drug paraphernalia, receipt of stolen property, possession of burglary tools, and exhibition of speed. Participants who decide to go through the program must take full responsibility for the harm caused. If the participant feels that they have been wronged and doesn't take responsibility, then the neighborhood courts program may not be suited for them, and the case may be routed back to the district attorney's office for filing. Full ownership of the harms caused by their conduct is key to being able to restore the harm to all parties involved. Once the participant has taken responsibility, the confidential restorative justice conference can be scheduled. The conference consists of community volunteer panelists, the participant, and the victim, if applicable. There are no judges, attorneys, or juries involved in the conference at all. During the conference, the neighborhood court volunteers support the victims, the participants, and their communities to be able to move forward in a direction that is positive. The neighborhood court panelists are the voice of the community. They represent the community needs and interests with respect to the charged crime. During the conference, the volunteer panelists and participants discuss the harm caused to the victim and the community. They will ask questions to the participant to understand what was going on in the participant's life when the crime happened, diving deep to the root of why the crime may have happened. And the panelists, the participant, and the victim can come up with collaborative agreements that will address the harm in a way that is specific, reasonable, attainable, and restorative, and not punitive. Some examples of agreements that may be offered are community service, 12-step programs, apology letters, victim restitution, reflection or research papers, anger or stress management, and so on. To complete the neighborhood court program, the participant must successfully complete all agreements that were made at the conference within 2 months. Once the agreements have been completed, the district attorney's office will dismiss the case, and the case will not be, and the participant will not have the case on their record. In addition, if we learn during this process that the participant may need additional services outside of the conference, referrals will be made. Now, if the case is not resolved in neighborhood court, it will be rerouted back to the district attorney's office. To be eligible for the program, one must be 18 and over. It is their first offense. Again, they must take full accountability for the crime. And if there is restitution involved, the participant must be willing to pay. Our community volunteers play an important role in the neighborhood court program. The community that is affected by the crime is empowered to resolve the crime by addressing the harm that was caused. The volunteers have been trained in restorative justice and problem solving by the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County. They include residents of Santa Cruz County, students, parents, retired community members, and the like. We ask volunteers for a 2-year commitment so that we have a strong base to pull from. Victim participation is also voluntary. A victim may choose whether they want to participate in a conference or not. The victim has several options in which they may choose to engage or not to engage. They may engage directly in the conference with the support of the victim advocate or indirectly through an impact statement. They may choose to participate directly without the support of a victim advocate or choose not to participate at all. If the victim chooses not to participate, they can still have a voice in how the harm can be restored, which is important. Goals of the Neighborhood Court Conference are to have community-driven solutions, be a place where the victim has a voice and say in how the harms will be restored, reduce burdens on the criminal court system, reduce the chance of the participant reoffending, and create direct connections to community opportunities. There are several ways in which neighborhood courts can strengthen communities that have been affected by crimes. They are by restoring the victim, the community, participant, and educating the participant. Neighborhood courts is victim-centered and places the emphasis on the victim's needs. It focuses on the participant making things right with the victim, which may include paying restitution to the victim who have suffered monetary loss. It restores communities by creating community inclusive, by giving residents the responsibility to play direct roles in overseeing of resolutions of offenses in their communities. It also educates the participant by supporting them in understanding why they commit the offenses as a result and how to work on restoring it. With the agreements given during the conference, the participant gets to learn about different restorative ways to repair the harm. It is important that we have a diverse group of community volunteers. We are currently recruiting for bilingual volunteers to be a part of the Neighborhood Courts team. The link to the Neighborhood Courts website will be in the chat along with my contact information. Again, I want to thank the collaborative partners, the Conflict Resolution Center, the Santa Cruz County Probation, District Attorney Jeff Roselle, Tara George, and everyone who's had a vision in implementing the Neighborhood Court program. Thank you so very much for being here this evening.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you for that wonderful rundown. Now, I'd like to hand the Zoom mic over to Danny to tell us more about your work from the Conflict Resolution Center's perspective.
Thank you, Jorge. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Danitza Torres. I'm the Neighborhood Courts Program Coordinator from the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz. So the Conflict Resolution Center has been facilitating restorative justice dialogues in Santa Cruz for over 20 years. And we're very happy to be here and to be partnering with the District Attorney's Office to expand restorative justice in Santa Cruz. As Elaine mentioned, this program is a partnership between a community-based organization, individual members of the community, and the justice system. Neighborhood courts is a way for the community to take responsibility for addressing the harm done by involving all those who have been affected. All parties will have an opportunity to engage at the Neighborhood Courts Conference to discuss what happened, explore the impacts of harm, determine the best way to repair the harm, and make sure that the act doesn't happen again. The Neighborhood Courts program, as Len said too, is based on restorative justice principles. It's a response that engages empathy, reasoning, restitution, attachment, healing, understanding, etc. So what is restorative justice? This is not new. Restorative justice has been around for as long as humans have been around. Long before we had police and courts and judges to deal with conflict, our ancestors likely talked around a fire together and discussed what happened and what should be done about it. Restorative justice focuses on the restoration of relationships and communities when harm has happened. It's an umbrella that encompasses community building and response to harm principles and practices that enrich communities, repair harm, restore relationships, and create safe, inclusive spaces for dialogue. That's what we're doing here with the Neighborhood Courts program. Restorative justice is about holding people accountable for their actions, helping them to explore and fully understand the impacts and harms, and taking a meaningful and reparative actions to right the wrong. The process is always voluntary and it's always survivor-centered. The needs of those harmed come first. This means that those that were harmed need to be open to a restorative process too. So restorative justice principles are used to address individual and collective psychological trauma for truth-telling and repairing harm. When we train volunteers, we prepare them to hold conferences, encouraging, exploring, clarifying, reflecting, validating, attending, asking open-ended questions, etc. Questions like, what happened? Who has been impacted? What do you think needs to happen to make things as right as possible? We know that trauma results primarily from disrupted relationships. So all the answers of these questions contribute to a story that survivors can believe and make sense of. Restored neighborhood courts is part of our trauma-informed practices. We encourage social connectedness, we develop community, we provide concrete support in times of need, and we consider a person's life experience and capacity in dealing with difficult situations. Overall, restorative justice prevents violence and builds peace into our lives and communities. It's the commitment to build a beloved and loving community that is sustainable and growing. Besides that, we're also working on community building with our panelists, keeping them trained on restorative justice, communicational skills, and other related topics. We have monthly meetings as an opportunity to share feelings, ideas, and experiences to build trust, share values, and behaviors. We're committed to build the social capital needed to support successful restorative justice practices. So throughout this forum, we have seen communication and collaboration between entities making important decisions that affect crime survivors or victims, making sure they have access to services and resources that are trauma-informed and community-based. The connection that we're building and present on this forum as members of this community shows that we're all going in the same direction. All these practices will help repair the harms, make survivors trust in the system, and reduce any additional trauma in the process. This ripple effects benefits the safety and healing of the entire community. At Neighborhood Courts, we're giving participants the chance to seek services if needed. We want to address the underlying needs and have a full list of resources available from our community. Making the decision to become more restorative and to imagine a world where harm is addressed with restorative practices takes more than just learning new terminology or vocabulary. It's an invitation to really envision a complete paradigm shift about the ways that we, as a society, think about and navigate harms, relationships, and healing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Danitza, perdón. And thank you, Elaine, for your share about the crucial work that's been done here. And yes, it's been around since we've been making fires, right? Around the camp, right? Way back. And so before we continue, I want to just take a breath. Okay. So please note for the next segment, we opted to do a pre-recording of this also because of, tech issues and internet and all. And so remember, shared safety means that we must center the voices of the survivors, right? And bring them forth. And so we invite you to listen to the next segment with an open mind and heart. And I gotta say, it's very impactful. So I'd like to introduce the next panel, right? And right after this video segment, I'd like for you to stick around because we are going to break into small groups and we want to hear from you, right? And connect with others. And so the next segment is moderated by Maria Rodriguez, and she's with Community Action Board. And we have the panelists, Lisa Tambura, Sandra Larson, Sylvia Cruitt, and Stacy Reynolds. So go ahead and play the video, and thank you. Maybe these are part of the tech issues that we experience here and there, or it takes a minute to load. It's all good, just bear with us. The video isn't playing on our side. Not sure if it's playing on yours, but we may want to reload the video.
Muy buenas tardes. My name is Maria Rodriguez. It is my honor to share this space as a survivor of domestic violence. As the program director of Community Action Board of Santa Cruz County, the Blueprint Shared Safety work is aligned to our mission and our agency values, especially around equity. It is very important that we work together to build a safe environment for all and together come to solutions that are fair, inclusive, to promote healing, promote healing and support the needs of survivors in our community. As we heard from Janet Valencia earlier, in the last 3 years, there have been some convenings throughout Santa Cruz County. 175 survivors were invited to participate to collect their stories and the impact in their journey. 11 recommendations were identified in the past to address the needs of the community. 3 of them that stood out to me the most is the need for navigators, system navigators, to support those victimized by crime to navigate services, promote the community voice for the needs and priorities of survivors, strengthen community trust with law enforcement. The goals of today's panel are to elevate the voices of those impacted by crime, to provide a safe space, to share what worked, to learn what support was missing for them in their journey. At times, speaker panels serve as a bridge to a healing process to connect with others by sharing our truths, coping strategies, and to advocate for our needs. Most important, to let other survivors know they are not alone. Too often, we survivors suffer in silence. As you may know, 1 in 3 girls is sexually abused by their 18th birthday. At times, we are afraid to report the crime to access services. And it is a great honor to have our panelists here today to share their stories. And I'm really grateful for the courage to Alisa, Sandra, Sylvia, and Stacy. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we enter this safe space, I would like to remind us that we will honor to the commitment of confidentiality for our panelists and to be able to listen with an open mind. If anyone in the audience needs to speak to a therapist, resources are listed in the chat box. As we enter our safe space, let's take a deep breath and exhale. As an example right now, we can just take a deep breath, all of us together, and breathe out. And let's do it one more time. Breathe in. Breathe out. Thank you. I would like to invite Alyssa to please share with us a little bit about her experience. Alyssa, in your experience, please tell us what worked for you, what helped you in your journey. What was missing for you when this happened to you? If you can please share with us what was instrumental in your healing process.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I'm really grateful to be here and to share my experience with everyone. I hope you hear something that educates you and helps you understand the experiences of survivors of abuse a little bit more. So my experience, one of my experiences is when I was in high school, I snuck out of our house, my mom's house. I was 14. I had really low self-esteem, and a boy asked me if I would sneak out and go hang out with him. And I was just so excited to have attention. I didn't really have healthy female role models that really walked me through like building healthy self-esteem and boundaries. And, I was also a kid. And so I snuck out and I went to this house where this boy and his friends were waiting for me. And all of them raped me. I was 14 and there were 4 of them. And by the grace of God, another person showed up, another girl, and saw what had happened. I don't know if they had invited her over. To this day, I don't really know what that situation was like, but she had a car and she took me home. I texted a friend that this happened and, when it happened, and this friend had my mom's phone number. And so I snuck back in the house and got under my covers and just started crying. And this friend texted my mom. So my mom came into my room and asked me what happened, but then quickly shamed me for sneaking out. And then she called the police, and then the police came. You know, what really didn't work for me in my experience was that when the police came, it wasn't focused, the questions they asked me were not focused around like what had happened to me. There was no emotional support. Unfortunately, you know, with my parent, I didn't have that support either. But the emphasis was really on why did I sneak out in the first place? You know, I was wearing these jeans and a cute little tube top, and why was I wearing that? When I snuck out, did I want something to happen? There were just these questions that were very blaming towards me. And I felt like for a very long time that what happened was my fault because of it. I didn't really understand that it wasn't my fault. The way the police handled it was not okay. That didn't work for me. The police officers that came and questioned me were also all male. And looking back, you know, they didn't have any female officers come and talk to me. You know, one thing which I reflect on that might seem really little, but for me it wasn't, is, you know, when something like this happens, the police take your clothes. They take the clothes that you were wearing, right? They take it as evidence. And I was low income at the time, and my mother, who had a drinking problem, really didn't support me. And so I didn't have clothes that were purchased for me. I had clothes that were like hand-me-downs or clothes I managed to, you know, take from friends or other places. And I just was so upset in this moment that was really like emotionally big for me and hurtful, that the police took my clothes. Because I remember thinking like, those are my only pair of jeans. Where am I going to get another pair of jeans? And unfortunately, we live in a world with, you know, systemic poverty and these like larger structural issues that are really difficult to fix. And I shouldn't have had to worry as a teenager where I would get new clothes from. And it's really sad that like that was even a consideration for me. Like I had just been raped by multiple boys, and one of my fears was like not having clothes, like not having jeans that would fit me anymore. And so it was just like the whole experience, just the trauma was compounded by the way that other folks like responded to it and reacted to it. I would say, and I'll wrap it up because I know I may be going a little over time, is that what did work for me ultimately was therapy. Finding a therapist who walked me through healing that shame and, you know, not being embarrassed of what happened and understanding that I still had value and worth. And then the second thing is education, understanding that I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that went through these experiences. And that the way that the police acted, you know, doesn't reflect justice, doesn't reflect what should have happened in that situation. So that is my story in a nutshell. And thank you for letting me share it.
Thank you so much, Elisa, for your information, for sharing your story. I do want you to know that it was not your fault. And you are not to blame for what happened to you. And I am so sorry that, you know, you had to face this crime. I would like to transition to Sandra. Sandra, if you can please share with us your experience, what helped you at that time? What was missing for you? What helped you in your healing process? I know that you and I know, everybody knows that when trauma is not addressed and survivors don't get the access services or the support needed, the trauma symptoms will manifest with time. If you can please share with us a little bit about, you know, in regards to the impacts to your family, your children. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, unfortunately, I had to flee a domestic violence situation. He was hitting my son with the buckle end of a belt and other intolerable rage things that I finally got away with a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. And the things that I learned in retrospect is that our nervous system runs the show. And when we are traumatized, we can't think or speak or feel or run sometimes. And so to understand the difference between being safe and not safe, and to be able to address understanding children need to know safe or not safe, and to recognize and advance red flags before they get unsafe. Because both of my children, even though, Santa Cruz is wonderful, we have a lot of really positive services, but if they're, chronic states of fight or flight, they can't learn, they don't have good behavior skills. It's not easy to parent a child in that state. And so there were a lot of behavior issues that I think led to further trauma. Like when I took my daughter to a counselor, I was not allowed in the room. And then it turns out this counselor got arrested for abusing children. He was a pedophile. So it's like weird. Bringing a strange man into my life under those circumstances is like, no. How to keep my children safe. We're a place where we can be, and having other, knowing that I wasn't alone. Like I wasn't just white trash that fucked up. That a lot of people go through this, and that there are people who are supportive. Like where do we find the support that's needed? I was fortunate in that I had some friends reach out. I didn't really have family that was available, but I had some friends who were helpful. And so I really learned that for me now it's like soul work to offer services to teach mental health skills. Simple, basic, like learning to pause and take a breath. Learning to recognize in a child, something happened to this kid. Help him. Don't just judge him. And telling somebody go meditate is like such a slap in the face. If you're not safe, you don't want to close your eyes. And a lot of times talking about it just makes it worse, So scholarships, I kept getting them scholarships, and that really helped. Twin Lakes Church and Camp Hammer, and Tim Corcoran runs the Rites of Passage for 13-year-old boys, which was really profound for my son. I got them involved with different, work exchanges with horses, but still things weren't addressed. And they are both wounded adults today with issues that are deep and need, once we can feel safe inside ourselves, then we can help our children to feel safe, and our neighbors to feel safe, and our community to feel safe. But until we're there, it's like the world is just impacting us, Mm-hmm. In order to radiate, we have to come from our heart and feel safe. And so that's what my goal is to teach, teachers and mental health care workers how to be that for our children, and especially our young daughters. It's too common. They need to know it's a special thing to be a young woman, and it needs to be honored and protected.
Thank you, Sandra. Sandra, if I have a follow-up question, if you were to tell us what is the agency that you feel that played the most impact to support you in this process, who would that agency be?
Well, I think the Community Action Board is an umbrella for a lot of the agencies that help me. Defensa de Mujeres and dientes and families in transition. We were in Twin Lakes College, provided some services.
Thank you. Yes, it is really important that in this process with community violence and trauma, that we have a no wrong door policy where people can go to services and access services where they go to offer more trauma-informed services. Thank you so much for your sharing with us your story. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. With that, I'd like to ask Sylvia. Sylvia, you played a huge role developing the Shared Safety Survivors at the Center report. Can you speak on how it felt to be a part of the process and also briefly share with us your story? What helped you and what was missing for you in this process?
Well, hi, my name is Sylvia. Hola, me llamo Sylvia. I have to say, being part of doing the research and everything that went along with it, me being able to present, what was going on with me and the whole journey, it was healing. It really was a healing situation, and it started, bringing the sense of empowerment, and the fact that anybody was interested in knowing, what we, the victims and survivors, need to be able to move forward with our lives. Thank you. Is an empowering thing, and it just made me feel like I was doing something great. And then my story, and I apologize for that. My story, I was shot in the head. It's going to be 8 years in April. I was shot in the head by a shotgun, and I was in the hospital for 11 days. And then when I came home, I still had many, many months of recovery that I needed to do. And at the beginning, I was completely blind. And so trying to maneuver through the house with no vision, crashing into everything, learning to eat again. I was repeating things over and over again. And my head was hurting nonstop. And I even, physically, I was feeling like little pops going on inside my brain. So whatever was happening, all those pellets in my brain, it definitely was an issue. And I tired very easily. So what I can say is because I was in that recovery process for so long, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that I was not going to be able to drive again or be able to go back to work. I didn't know so many things. And I'm lost again, sorry. I didn't know. The biggest thing that I didn't know was that the person who shot me had been tried and convicted and was to serve a 7-year sentence. And this happened the year before. So I don't know why, but the district attorney and the judge allowed him to go home to settle his affairs, whatever that means. And then to be able to come back to serve his sentence, well, no surprise, he never came back. And so he was loose for a whole year until the night that he shot me. And I didn't know that the sheriff's department did not go find him. I don't know if they even tried. I truly don't know. So he was out and he was able to, create so much havoc. And the biggest thing is that nobody asked me if I needed to settle my affairs because I might not survive that night. And I'm lost again. So can you ask me? Sorry.
Yes. So if you can share with us what are some what helped you in your healing process?
Oh, well, I can tell you
what helped you to be here.
What helped me, the biggest thing I have to say, the primary thing was my sister worked at the law library in the court. And so she knew who I needed to contact and for what reasons. She knew to tell me about all the happenings of the court hearings that were going to be coming up. She knew to have me contact Michelle Cardinelli, which is the victim's advocate in the district attorney's office. Be in contact with the sheriff's department. She also, knew that I needed all the different doctors and surgeons to be able to fully recover. So she's the person who became my advocate, the system navigator. And this, I think, is extremely important as to what is needed, going forward. And the other thing was Michelle Cardinelli at the district attorney's office. She's the one who helped me get set up with a therapist who actually did helping victims of crime. And she also helped me get set up with the state compensation, which I forget what it's called. So these are all things that help me in the healing process.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Yes, it is so important that we reach out to family, friends, agencies to be able to help us move forward. Thank you so much for the information and for sharing with us your story.
Thank you.
It is very powerful to also hear the work that you have been doing in the work that we are, in the reason why we're here today, the shared safety. Thank you so much for that as well.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask, invite Stacy to please share with us a little bit of her experience, also the same, what was missing for you and what are some of the things that help you heal. There has been some shift in language between, the victim and the survivor. If you can please, share with us a little bit of your story, and also you can also speak a little bit on the Compassionate Friends chapter, and so for us to learn a little bit more on that too as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stacy. I'll just set the stage. It's October 6th, Monday, 2008, and I have a daughter who's in college at Cal Poly, but she's up in Seattle doing an exchange program. I live right downtown next to Loudon Nelson. I have a nephew from Florida who graduated college. He's sleeping on my couch because he wants to see how cool Santa Cruz is. And that Monday evening, my son heads out the door. Robbie does. He runs into two 14-year-old girls who have rented a hotel room down by the boardwalk. They invite him and his two buddies to go back to the room. There's 3 gang members in that room. They made it clear that they are not involved in gangs, and they partied some, and then there was an altercation, and Robbie was stabbed once, and the blade went through between 2 ribs, and it nicked his heart. And Robbie bled out in the emergency room and died that night. And so there's a knock on my door at 4:30 in the morning to let me know that my son will never come home again. And
sorry,
my house starts filling with people. I feel very fortunate. I had a very, I'm an early educator in Davenport at the school there, and that's my community. And so everybody came to support me. And at one point I can remember asking who this one woman is sitting in my house, and it's Julie Schneider, who is my police advocate, was there to help me navigate this experience where I was told I was the victim of a violent crime, which didn't make sense to me, because my son was the victim. It wasn't, I wasn't the victim, but that was how, I guess, the verbiage at that time was family members of people, and this was murder was a word that I had it was a really hard word and I asked people not to use that word in the same sentence with my son's name. So over time, it shifted, and we became survivors of crime, not victims of crime. And that's what I feel like part of this process that we all need to go through to find a way to coexist with the experience that we've had is to label ourselves survivors, not victims. I think that's really important in the process. And what happens when you enter this system where you're learning to survive is it is very isolating. And what I found is I was told about an organization called the Compassionate Friends, and it's a support group for families that have had a child die. And there wasn't one in Santa Cruz. There was one down in Monterey, there was one in San Jose, and I attended both, and it was too far and it was too hard to get there, be able to tell my story, and then drive back. So I connected with another mother here in town whose son had died, and we started a local chapter, the Compassionate Friends. And it's almost like peer counseling, but it's all volunteers, and we have all had a child die for any number of reasons out there. And so I spent 5 years leading that group and facilitating once a month a support group where people, we pass a rock around and we share our story. And it was very healing to be able to like hold the space and help other people through this process. So the court system didn't work very well for me, but I don't know what to say. I felt like a novice to begin with, and Julie held my hand and reminded me to breathe while we were in there. But the jury was allowed to like wander out with my friends who were there to support me, and then jury members we lost jury members because of conversations that happened, and there was there could have been a mistrial, things like that. There's a lot of stuff I did not understand. So is there anything else?
No, thank you so much. No, thank you, Dasa, for sharing your story. Healing through action to support others who have been on the same shoes as we have. It makes a big difference. To be able to understand the same language, right? They don't have to explain or describe. We know what it is, what it feels like. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. I do have a last question for each one of you. It can just maybe in one sentence or two. If you could tell the past you something, what would that be? What would that be? As I mentioned earlier, I am a victim of child sexual abuse myself. Looking back at myself, back when I was 5, 6, 7, domestic violence at 17, I would tell myself it was not my fault and I'm not to blame and carry the shame. And healing happens. So what would that be for you? What would that look like for you? And I'd like to start with Alisa.
I think I would say similar things. I would tell myself that, that it wasn't my fault, and that the shame I'm experiencing and the pain that I was experiencing, like that too shall pass. That pain, it might still be there, but it lessens over time. And I would tell myself that I am a beautiful, amazing, wonderful human whose worth is not dictated by the actions of others. I just have worth and value because I'm here.
Thank you. How about you, Sandra?
Well, I believe that I have 2 amazing children and they're worth fighting for. I'm blessed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sylvia?
Well, I gotta say, going through the whole process, it was, I kept asking, why did this happen to me? I'm the kind of person who followed all the rules, all the laws, everything you learn in church. I did everything right. And why did this happen to me? And I was questioning God a lot. And I finally came in therapy. It just came out where I just said, shit happens. Like, you can never, ever say this happened to me because of this, or this happened to so-and-so because of that. No, shit just happens sometimes. And I apologize for cursing, but this is real. This is what I'm feeling. Mm-hmm. This is what helped me kind of move beyond the pain.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Stacy?
I find this a very challenging question because guess if I could tell myself something, it would, and I think I said this in the courtroom after they convicted the boy that that killed Robbie, that all the worry I put in as a mother of this young man, I should have probably been celebrating more, you know, and grateful for the time we had.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us this safe space and your stories, you know, of what happened to you. I want to express my gratitude to each one of you. It is so important that we work together to identify common issues and helping victims of a crime so that we can support with trauma-informed and culturally responsive practices and that are inclusive and that there is no wrong door process policy. And not to re-victimize the victim more than what already happened to them. So it's so important. Today we have law enforcement, we have social service organizations, county judges, probation. We have many different people here today in this audience today. And I'm really hopeful that with the information that we have gathered, that we have shared with us today, they come up with processes to ensure that people who have been harmed by violence get the services that are needed. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for making this space and for being here today with us. Thank you.
This time, I would like to welcome two people to recognize two of these leaders that have contributed to this work. I'd like to introduce Julie Masesevic with the Walnut Avenue Family and Women's Center, and Mary Lou Alejandres with Santa Cruz Barrios Unidos, who will both recognize the local community hero.
Thank you, Jorge. I appreciate that. So we just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge somebody that we lost this year. On October 31st of this year, our community member, Ama Delavet, passed away from a rare and aggressive lung cancer. So full disclosure, some of the words that I'm sharing were the words of her friends and family and written statements. So I had the good fortune of working with Ama in her role at the Survivors Healing Center, a program of family services agency which advocates and provides comfort and support for survivors of childhood sexual abuse. Among many other efforts, Ama was on the Santa Cruz County Children's Network cabinet. She was a strong leader in the Child Abuse Prevention Council, and she was a member of this community education and engagement work group while we were designing the work on the blueprint for shared safety. Ama was born in California. She spent her early childhood in the Esalen Institute in the Big Sur Coast. She also lived in Germany during different times of her life. She had a master's degree in counseling psychology from JFK University and worked as a therapist in private practice, but also worked for 15 years at the Survivors Healing Center. Ama loved adventure and enjoyed spending time in nature. And I really loved this quote shared by her friends and family. It said, "She chased experiences in wild places with people she cared about, didn't sweat the details, and kept us all laughing through good times and bad." Ama was one of those rare people that was filled with hope and light while helping others with their pain and loss. She dreamed of ending child sexual abuse in the world, and she worked hard to do that. With a big smile, Ama would say, "I stand for love and joy." She was a kind and generous person willing to give you the shirt off of her back, and she did. So we're grateful tonight for the work that Ama contributed to this community, and we're grateful to have known her, and she will be dearly missed. So thank you for taking this moment to remember Ama Delavet. Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Mary Lou.
Thank you. I want to remember my good friend Debbie, and please forgive me because I'm reading from a newspaper article because it's so close and so hard for me right now. Debbie Aguilar devoted much of her life in advocating for those who had died and the family members who'd outlived them. After losing her son, Stefan, to gun violence in 2002, she became an outspoken, prominent leader in Salinas, urging officials to resolve cold cases in the interest of justice for victims of crime, and also creating vigils for families to keep the memories of their loved ones present. Debbie died Saturday, January 23rd, with complications to COVID, and she was in the Navigator hospital in Salinas. She was 60 years old. In her life, Debbie was a relentless fighter who refused to let the public and the criminal justice system forget about murder victims. Some of her work was in the realm of advocating pressure prosecutors and police to never stop pursuing leads. Some of her work was grief support, bringing mothers like herself together in solidarity. Her group, Time for Grieving and Healing, repeatedly brought dozens of families of murdered victims to Sacramento during National Victims Week. She refused to let people forget about her son, Stefan, or the unique form of grief and unsolved murders that unsolved murders create, often becoming emotional and choking during remarks, but she remained posed and sticking to her message that we should stop the violence from claiming more lives. Debbie founded a coalition called 100 Mothers. This was a group of 100 mothers who had all lost a child to violence. For years since Stefan died, she held the vigils for these rallies throughout the region. Debbie, this is the thing about Debbie. Debbie was recognized by many civic community leaders, but she was also recognized by the state leaders. In 2004, Senator Barbara Boxer acknowledged her accomplishments, and then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger also honored her and put her on the team as a member to help bring long-term strategies in the fight against gang violence. Right before Debbie died and right before COVID hit all of us, Debbie and I were friends for years. This is so very hard for me, but she joined Barrios Unidos and going to Soledad prison and speaking to the individuals in there about gang violence and the violence that took her son away. For many of those individuals that were in there because of murder. By the time she finished speaking, you could hear a pin drop. If I could say anything to Debbie, I would tell her how much I was so proud of her and how much I admired her for her guts and never to give up. She took her grief and she turned it into a movement of healing for other parents to help them move forward in the grieving process and into forgiveness. And that was the thing about Debbie. Debbie was a forgiving person. And so I today want to remember her. And just so you know, I want to put this out there. There is a go-to fund for Debbie. She leaves 3 children behind in Salinas. Her ceremony will be live streamed next week on the 11th. So again, I'm just thankful that she was part of my life, and we will definitely miss her. Thank you very much.
For a moment of silence for both the community heroes. And thank you for sharing those beautiful words, both of you. So, sorry, it's very emotional. So I want to continue and close out the evening today by saying thank you to all of you that have stuck through this evening. And once again, if I can ask my colleagues to post up the resources on the chat, and please do take note of them. And I want to give special thanks to Cameron Sutton, Sophia Kilroy, and the CEEW members that supported this event. I'd like to also acknowledge the members of the survivor panel and for your courage in sharing your story, and also for those of you here that shared your story, and I'm sure the stories that were shared in the small groups as well, because it's those stories that move policy. So thanks to our co-sponsors in Santa Cruz County Community Corrections Partnership for funding this critical work. And thank you for sticking through this forum. And so just real briefly, I'd like to share with you the next steps, right? Because we're not just presenting information, we're not just presenting the shared safety framework, but there's some next steps. So the work group will continue to move the recommendations from the report forward, right? Very important. And you're gonna be receiving a post-forum survey, right? Via email and maybe also in the chat. And in this email and the survey, it's gonna highlight which ways you can get involved. Maybe you can join the CEEW team. Maybe have a role to play in the Watsonville Shared Safety Dialogues. Maybe, and maybe you're a survivor that is interested in starting a chapter, right, similar to Companions. Or perhaps you're bilingual and interested in volunteering with neighborhood courts. Or maybe you just want to volunteer with neighborhood courts. So just a quick reminder that the recording and the PowerPoint will be emailed along with the resources for survivors of crime and mental health resources. And you can also like and share the Shared Safety Facebook page. And lastly, I want to end with this. So we're only as healthy as most vulnerable, right? So when one person is suffering, we're all suffering. Now more than ever, with the rise in suicides and violence, we need to act together. We know these are all symptoms of traumatic stress and isolation. We must reach out to our loved ones, our neighbors, our colleagues, and our community members. Think of a youth, an elderly person, or a friend, a family member, or a colleague, or even an acquaintance that you haven't connected with recently. Reach out to them. Just say something like, hey, I'm thinking about you. How are you doing? This creates a sense of community and connection, and you'll never know the impact you have with the little effort you make. So thank you all and have a good night.